Welcome to 22-1 for PhDs with Ashley and Dave, where we spend 20 minutes sharing two perspectives on building a successful industry career and leave you with one actionable step to help you start preparing today. Today, we are talking about how progress is made in industry versus academia, persuasion versus proof.
All right, this sounds like it's going to be another big mindset shift. Just thinking about the word persuasion and how it might be better than proof feels a little tricky as a PhD student myself. So, can you first just start with what you mean by persuasion?
You're right. This is a tricky mindset because as PhDs, we are used to proof. We're used to proving anything that we think. We're used to the analysis, the data, it speaks for itself, right? That's generally how we think, and that's really important in an academic setting. Persuasion is about, we get a lot of bad ideas about what persuasion is. It's really influencing somebody to follow your idea, influencing them, persuading them that your ideas are good and that they should accept them, follow along. Now, this can sometimes sound like coercion, or maybe we even have the bad idea of kind of the stereotype of the used car salesman, right? But that's not what we're talking about at all here. Persuasion in this case, this is a positive thing. This is you are an expert in whatever project, problem, task, whatever you've studied. Maybe you brought in some experience, some expertise. Maybe you have studied it, and now it's your job to help the rest of your team understand what you see. So this goes hand in hand with the decision, making decisions, the certainty versus speed, and making decisions that we talked about a couple of episodes ago. Because if there really is no right answer, and you have to make a decision when you don't really know what the right answer is, well, then you can't prove it either, right? In our academic research, we are used to gathering enough data, enough analysis that we can say we know this to be true, and that's when we publish it. That's the proof side. But when many decisions don't have a right answer, and many people on our team may not have the background, the expertise we do, we couldn't prove it to them perhaps anyway. Persuasion becomes the key. And it's not the negative thing that we often think about coercion or talking somebody into doing something they don't want to do. It's simply helping them see what we see.
Sure. As you were speaking, I was thinking there is kind of a decent amount of persuasion in proof in a way for anybody who works on data visualization or putting a cohesive and convincing lab meeting presentation together. It actually doesn't feel like they're too far apart, or they don't need to be as far apart as maybe it seems. I imagine that maybe there are easier ways to hop into this persuasion mindset, even if you're kind of still in the proof mindset.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Ashley, because one way to think of that is you could say, look, I have this data to present. I'm going to build a graph or a chart or whatever. And we know there are good ways to do it and bad ways to do it. Well, what would a good way to do it be? It would be something that very quickly helps other people see the point we're trying to make. Even if the analysis speaks for itself, we can help it speak more clearly. That is an element of persuasion. And now we're just talking about taking that further. Now it's a situation where perhaps we don't have the right answer, but we still need to help people see what we see. It's a process of, I think this is the best way forward. How can I help the people I'm working with also agree that it's the best way forward?
Absolutely. I think I'm still hopping back. For anybody who is not convinced that persuasion is positive, is not a bad thing. I actually recently sat through a lab meeting for one of my fellow graduate students who had presented the data and sort of was just like, bam, can't you see? And nobody in the room could really see. And so we spent a majority of the time talking about ways to effectively communicate that data in a way that was literally more persuasive. And so I think the word persuasive still circulates around the academic bubble. It's just thinking about it instead when maybe you don't have the right data or the perfect amount of data to sort of move forward with the proof. You then have to move forward with the persuasion. So, how do you advise folks who maybe are, you know, as academics, we're kind of uncomfortable making claims, it seems like, when we don't have that certainty, like we talked about, or the perfect amount of proof or perfect amount of understanding, right? Name your PhD stereotype here. So that uncomfortableness with now bringing people on or bringing people in on your own decision, especially when there are time and resources that go into moving forward now with your decision, right? How do we think about getting comfortable with persuading others when we don't have that full bit of knowledge?
Right. I mean, so again, this goes back to, was it episode 3 when we talked about making decisions? So, what you're talking about perhaps is two stages of comfort. The first is, as we discussed in that episode, how do you get comfortable with the decision itself? And we discussed it as a journey. We don't know for sure, but we can't predict the future. Nobody really knows what the best path is. So instead, pick one and then do the best you can to work and make that path you chose, make that journey as good as possible. Well, that's where the rest of your team starts to come in. Now we're talking about the second level of that. Now, how do I be comfortable with helping them see what I see? Or maybe let's start with persuading them that this is a good way to go, because that can sound uncomfortable. But if you think about it instead, like, well, we don't know for sure. I've probably talked to my team members already to get any input they may have and weigh that, make that a part of the decision. But once I've made a decision or a recommendation, then it's about helping them see what I see, about why I think this is a good path forward, and enlisting them in helping make it a good path. So helping them see what I see, helping them see how it could be a fun, good,
Sure.
productive, whatever the specific situation is a big part of that. How can I help them see that we can all win together going forward in this direction? Again, not having certainty, but we think so. That's where that comfort's going to come in. It's not easy. I can't give you a way to say, oh, then it will be easy. But if you think about helping them see the value in it for them.
Absolutely. And so that persuasion component, it sounds like you've incorporated quite a few techniques in this persuasion, right? Talking to your team, getting their input, also getting some of the facts that we all know together, right? To build your sort of, I guess, hypothesis or strategic direction moving forward. And
Mhm.
then also you're throwing in a little bit of like, this is what the future could look like. This is how it could be not only enjoyable, but productive, right? It sounds like you're bringing in a lot of different, I guess, techniques in the way that you're communicating this. So, is there
Yeah.
anything else that maybe I've missed in my synopsis here that you're sort of bringing in to make persuasion persuasive, I guess?
I don't think there's nothing you've missed. I don't know that there's anything else to bring in, but how about this? I can give you an example from my industry career, the last job that I had, job before I started Turning Science, about a situation where I both had to make a decision and then persuade my team that it was a good choice. Because I think that will help illustrate what is a real world situation where this could happen. So I was working at a company. We put laser-based combustion sensors on industrial furnaces, and you don't
Mhm.
need to know what that means. It doesn't really matter. In short, for anybody who does care, we did laser spectroscopy to measure combustion properties in a very large industrial furnace, like the size of a room. Furnaces that maybe burn coal to make electricity, or refinery furnaces, things like that. Point is, we had two possible configurations for measuring this based on the practicality of installing our lasers. One was a high resolution with many paths and a lot of data. One was a low resolution version with only a few paths and less data. Now, any scientist, engineer, anybody in a technical field will say, well, more data is better, right? We had to decide, and as the director of product management, I had to decide for this new product, which were we going to develop? Which were we going to launch into the market, plan out and launch into the market as a product? And it was easy to think more data is better. But I also had to think about more data that's also more expensive. And so whoever was making the decision at our customer, whether to buy it or not, that would impact them the other way. They would prefer cheaper. Higher resolution meant we had to cut a lot more holes in the furnace, and it also made a much more sophisticated instrument for the furnace operators who don't understand lasers or spectroscopy or any of that to use. So while at face value, many of the technical people in this and people on my team as well were thinking high resolution is best, I had the experience and the background of thinking about from the customer's point of view and from everyone there who would have to be involved, all of the stakeholders. And I decided that the low resolution version was a better approach, better to get something in there to help them some and show that it would work since this was new and we were a new company coming in this way. That would be a much better way to go. If we went with the high resolution version, I just thought there's too much of a risk that the engineers on their team would love it, but the operators would decide it's too complex and not use it, or the manager of the site would say it's too expensive and not even want to buy it in the first place, and that would be a real lose. So I had to make the decision was the first step, and then move forward trying to make that one work, talking to their customers, operations team, and getting buy-in from them. But of course, I had to come back to my own team as well and help them see and get them on board because we all have to develop this product. And the way I did it was describing the customer's viewpoint, just as I just did for you. Hey, I understand everybody here. We love data. I love data, right? I'm a physicist myself. More data usually sounds better. Higher resolution sounds better. But here's how our customer will see it. Somebody's going to have to write a check for this, and the more expensive it is, the less they're going to want to buy it. We know we have a brand new technology here, and people are a little skeptical of it. So if the barrier is too high, they may not buy it. We know that more data is great, but put yourself in the position of an operator of this furnace. They've already got lots of controls and computer screens. If we give them something too complex, they may just say, look, I don't understand this, I don't need it, and not use it. We don't want that either. So I won't go into all the details, but that is, in summary, how I approached persuading my team, bringing them on board, because we had to pick a path. I had made a decision. I had to make sure that was as likely to work as possible. And a big part of that was persuading my team that this wasn't a bad idea, that it was actually a good idea. And that's how I approached it.
Totally. That's such an awesome story. I think I was convinced as you were speaking. I was like, we have to go with the low resolution. This has to happen.
Mhm.
So I think you did a great job persuading someone who knows nothing about what you're doing. But something you've been emphasizing is the importance of considering your audience, right? Thinking about the audience and also the goals, right? At the end of the day, your goal was to make profits, right? Which we've talked about before, and also to make happy customers. And so at the end of the day, thinking about that end goal, coming back to your team, sort of bringing everybody up to speed and on the same page and moving forward with your like overall goals. I think that that is super, super cool. Believe it or not, it actually reminds me of a personal experience that I've had in my PhD already. I think one of the most important skills that I've had to learn in my time in graduate school has actually been strategic communication or this sort of persuasive communication. And it has taken a really long time. So, for a tiny bit of background for folks, I wanted to do something a little wild in my PhD. I wanted to come in and try something a little bit entrepreneurial, something a little bit different. And it took about, I want to say a year and a half of figuring out the best way to bring my advisor on board and convince him that this is something that is worthwhile, our time, our resources, our efforts put towards this. And in that year and a half of trying to figure it out, I started with here's everything I've ever read on this molecule and why it's so cool and why everybody should think this is awesome. And I'm saying pages upon pages upon pages. Here's this, here's that, here's this, here's that. Just lab meeting upon lab meeting, slides upon slides, all the thing. It wasn't until shifting more towards what does he care about? Right? What are the things, what are the goals of his laboratory, his small little company, right? That I like to think laboratories are. What is his goal? And how do my passions or interests fit in with those goals? And how can I relay that in the most succinct and coherent way possible? It ended with a new arm of the project focusing on the thing that he cares about the most. And then the second thing was 3 papers. That's it. Boom, boom, boom. And it blew my mind because I was like, don't you want to know every single piece of information about, where this molecule originated, the technical issue that they had in the 1960s, and how we've now progressed to 2025 and where we are now and the whole history of it? And turns out, no, that is not the most efficient way. And it also seems like making your audience work really hard, like you said, about the complexity of the thing you might have been proposing for your customers. Too complex can make folks unhappy as well. And sometimes we get muddled in proof that we really lose any possibility of persuasion. So hopefully that sort of relates a PhD-ish story to what we're talking about today.
That is an excellent story, Ashley. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, wow, so much in that. So, first of all, I like stories. We like stories. Having a story like that to tell when you're out looking for a job is great, right? A story about how you persuaded your boss is a powerful story. No good manager in industry hires a PhD to just do what they tell them to do. They want them to be an independent thinker. And part of that is being able to say, well, hey, I looked into this and here's what I think, even if the boss disagrees with it. That's an important thing. And that's a good story to be able to tell. But the point you mentioned in there that is gold, this is, if there's one thing to remember about persuasion, it is think about your audience and what matters to them. And there's no trickery in this at all. It's simply saying, well, if I think this is the best path forward, the only way I'm really going to get their buy-in is if I can see it from their perspective and see how it helps them, not how it helps me, not how it's shown by the data, but how it helps them. That is critical. That if you understand that one thing, you understand so much of persuasion. There's a scientist named Yasmin Saudagar who I interviewed for my book Shaping the World, who was talking about persuasion. She started a company called Neurescence in Toronto, Canada. Actually, imaging neurons in vivo in mice is what their product was. But she talks about persuasion and she says it's a strategy game. Approach it like a strategy game where you're trying to help someone else see what you do, but think about it from their perspective. What matters to them? How might this help them achieve their goals? So it's a win-win kind of approach, right? That is the game. That is a huge part of persuasion. That is really the key.
Absolutely. I think it can be a win-win. I mean, I'm excited about my project. I think my advisor is as well, right? And so at the end of the day, persuasion doesn't have to be tricking them into what you want. It's really like finding a way for, or it seems like it really is finding a way for your strategy moving forward to fit with their interests, their desires, their ultimate goals. So I'm really excited about this mindset shift because I really think PhDs are so primed to do this already. Whether it's in a lab meeting, it's a conversation with your advisor, it's collaborating with somebody, it's just talking in the laboratory about what's going on with your project, and you can share what's going on, what's cool, next steps. I think there's so many cool ways to communicate using persuasion right now. So let's hop in. Let's hop into what the action is for today. So one
Yeah.
action taken away from this episode. Do you want to go ahead and explain what it is, Dave?
Yeah, so as you said, there are many opportunities to look for this in an academic setting. So the action is to look for an opportunity to persuade someone this week. A great way to do that is look for where you perceive that someone maybe doesn't agree with you. And I don't mean necessarily an argument. I mean, you could do that. It's simply you have a different perspective than someone. It could be your boss. That's awesome. But maybe you don't want to start there if you're feeling uncomfortable. Maybe it's a coworker. And I know early in my career, I had a tendency to shy away from where I would have a difference of opinion, thinking, I won't get into that. Now I look at that as an opportunity to help them see it my way. That's what the action, that's a good way to find an opportunity for the action for this week. Find some situation where there's somebody you work with doesn't see things your way and see if you can bring them along and do it the way we talked, thinking about, well, what is their perspective? How might I be able to help them see things my way?
That's super cool. And that's such a great reframe, I think, something that might be uncomfortable to many folks. Seeing it as an opportunity is that's really beautiful. I
Yeah.
don't know about other PhD students or folks in the academic space, but there's a lot of disagreement, I think, around here, right? Of the best approach, the best way to move forward, the best next experiment, right? And so, especially if folks are more senior or even some that are more junior, these are all really wonderful opportunities to chat with people, and maybe you can even work your way up a little bit. Um, any sort of chance to, again, take that opportunity to work on persuasion would be super beneficial. So thank you for that reframe. All right, so we are at the end of this 5-episode series working on industry mindset for PhDs. We hope you all have gained some valuable insight into how industry functions and how you can prepare now for your industry career. But we also hope that through those weekly actions, you've already made tangible progress. And I think that this week's action will also help with that. So we encourage you to continue to revisit all those 5 episodes, right? This is a mindset shift. This is something you work on as much as you possibly can. Because I'm sure you're all aware mindset shifts do not happen overnight. So thank you, Dave. Thank you for doing this series with me. This has been an absolute blast. And to folks who are interested, tell us if you liked it. Let us know if there's any more that you would like to see, and we'll keep helping with the industry mindset. So thank you again.